Welcome to all our viewers in India and around the world. You're watching Defense Dynamics and I'm Danveer Singh coming to you from New Delhi. On Defense Dynamics, today we talk about the war before the war. As India switches off the enemy with the latest indigenous electronic jammers arming the Indian Air Force. Up in the space, India begins work on its own space station, staking a permanent claim beyond Earth. In the vast oceans, enemy carriers are under hypersonic threat. A new Indian missile redraws the power balance in the Indian Ocean, and in my take, we ponder over why borrowed weapons mean borrowed sovereignty, why control not imports decide national security. But before this, the global defense headlines first.
India and the European Union on Tuesday signed an agreement to establish a security and defense strategic partnership. The pact will enhance cooperation in counter-terrorism and strengthen collaboration in maritime and cybersecurity domains. During the 77th Republic Day Parade in 2026, India showcased its growing defense capabilities and advanced indigenous technology. Systems on display included DRDO's long-range anti-ship hypersonic missile, the Universal Rocket Launcher System Suryastra, and High Mobility Reconnaissance Vehicle or HMRV mounted on the Takshak platform. Australia has received its first MC-55A Peregrine Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance and Electronic Warfare aircraft. The delivery marks the first of 4 aircraft ordered for the Royal Australian Air Force under Project Air 555 Phase 1. The UK Ministry of Defence has shortlisted 7 companies to develop an unmanned loyal wing for British Army's Boeing AH-64E Apache Guardian attack helicopter. Firm including Anduril BAE Systems and Lockheed Martin UK will compete under Project Nyx to deliver a land autonomous collaborative platform. German defense manufacturer Rheinmetall is producing 4 variants of a Caracal 4x4 airborne vehicle for Germany and Netherlands. The production follows a framework agreement signed between Germany's Bundeswehr in July 2023 to supply up to 3,058 Caracal vehicles to both countries.
In modern warfare, the first casualty is no longer the soldier, it's communication. As conflicts from Ukraine to West Asia have shown, the side that controls electromagnetic spectrum controls the battlefield. And now, India has taken a decisive step in that invisible war. Bharat Electronics Limited, under the Ministry of Defence, has begun delivering its advanced ground-based very high ultra-frequency communication jammers to the Indian Air Force. A powerful indigenous system designed to silence enemy communications before a single shot is fired. So what does this mean for India's electronic warfare capability and how does it change future air operations? Let's take a closer look.
War before war. India is quietly reinforcing one of the most decisive and least visible dimension of modern warfare, the electronic warfare. Bharat Electronics Limited has commenced deliveries of its indigenous ground-based VHF-UHF communication jammer to the Indian Air Force, significantly enhancing India's ability to disrupt enemy command and control on the battlefield. Operating across very high frequency and ultra high frequency bands, this system is designed to jam enemy radio and tactical communication networks, disrupt coordination between ground forces, aircraft and command centers, and degrade situational awareness during high intensity operations. The enemy paralyzed without hitting. In today's network-centric wars, cutting communication links can paralyze an enemy force faster than kinetic strikes. This capability gains added importance when viewed against electronic warfare strength of India's 2 primary adversaries. China's People's Liberation Army considers electronic warfare as core pillar of its doctrine of informationized and intelligentized warfare. The PLA fields advanced EW brigades capable of wide area communication jamming, radar disruption, integrated cyber and electronic attacks. Chinese systems are designed to blind and confuse adversaries in opening minutes of conflict, particularly along contested borders and the Indo-Pacific region. Pakistan, meanwhile, has steadily upgraded its electronic warfare arsenal with Chinese origin EW systems integrated into both Pakistan Army and the Air Force. These capabilities focus on battlefield communication jamming, air defense suppression, supporting Pakistan's network air operations. Electromagnetic dominance is a force multiplier. In a potential two-front scenario, electromagnetic dominance becomes a force multiplier, enabling faster decision-making while denying the same advantage to the adversaries. The induction of the GBVU communication jammers ensures that the Indian Air Force can now contest and dominate the electromagnetic spectrum, supporting missions such as offensive counter-air operations, suppression of enemy air defenses, and joint operations with Army and Navy units. India's push for strategic autonomy. Equally important, this system reinforces India's push for strategic autonomy in sensitive electronic warfare technologies, reducing reliance on imported systems in a domain where secrecy and adaptability are critical. In modern conflict, the battle often begins in silence, in frequencies, signals, and data streams. And with this induction, India is ensuring it can fight and win that invisible war.
What makes this induction significant is not just technology but the timing. From Eastern Europe to Indo-Pacific, recent conflicts have shown that wars are increasingly being shaped through jamming, spoofing, and electronic disruptions and not by bombs. By inducting indigenous communication jammers, the Indian Air Force is preparing for exactly this kind of future battlefield, where winning the spectrum war could determine the outcome even before conventional combat begins. This also sends a clear signal. India is no longer just defending its networks, it is building the capability to actively deny, disrupt, and dominate the enemy's communications.
Invisible, silent, but decisive. As warfare shifts from firepower to information dominance, systems like these ensure that India is not just keeping pace, but staying ahead. Because in tomorrow's war, it may not matter whose weapons fire first. What will matter is whose communications survive. For decades, space was seen as a domain of exploration. Today, it is a domain of power. Satellites guide missiles, space assets shape battlefield awareness, and human presence in orbit is fast becoming a marker of strategic dominance. Now, India is preparing to make that leap permanent. The Indian Space Research Organization has initiated development of Bharatiya Antariksh Station, India's own indigenous space station aimed at establishing a continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. With the first human-rated module targeted for 2028, a fully operational capability is expected by 2035, which will mark India's transition from launch-capable nation to a sustained orbital power.
The Bharatiya Antariksh Station. India's space ambitions are entering an entirely new phase. The Indian Space Research Organization has formally invited Indian industry to design and construct the first human-rated module of Bharatiya Antariksh Station, a critical building block that will anchor India's long-term human presence in orbit. Planned to operate at an altitude of around 400 kilometers in low Earth orbit, the station will function as a national space laboratory, enabling round-the-clock scientific research, technology demonstrations, and strategic experimentation in microgravity. This initial module will be capable of supporting crew missions, hosting scientific payloads, docking with crew and cargo spacecraft. Over time, additional modules will be added, including laboratories, habitation sections, power units, and docking nodes, creating a fully modular, expandable space station. Aligned with Gaganyaan. This roadmap aligns closely with India's Gaganyaan, which will conduct its first crewed missions later this decade. Astronauts trained under Gaganyaan will eventually form the core crew for early station expeditions. Technologically, ISRO is building on recent successes in orbital rendezvous, docking experiments, and autonomous spacecraft operations, capabilities that are essential not just for civil space flight, but also for future space security architectures. Human rating, the first module, presents some most demanding engineering challenges India has ever undertaken. Closed-loop life support systems, radiation shielding against solar and cosmic exposure, thermal control in extreme orbital conditions, and secure digital and communication networks. Public-private partnership in space. To meet these challenges, ISRO is leveraging India's expanding private space ecosystem. Firms such as Larsen & Toubro and Tata Advanced Systems are expected to play a significant role, reflecting a shift towards public-private partnership models under Indian space policy of 2023. From a strategic standpoint, the implications are profound. Today, only a handful of powers, the United States, Russia, China, and Europe, possess the ability to maintain long-duration human presence in space. With Bharatiya Antariksh Station, India joins this elite club on its own terms, without dependence on foreign platforms like the International Space Station. India's space station, a counterbalance. China's Tiangong space station has already demonstrated how orbital infrastructure can enhance technological prestige and geopolitical leverage. India's station offers a counterbalance, particularly in the Indo-Pacific and Global South, by positioning New Delhi as a responsible, collaborative space power. Scientifically, the station will unlock advanced research in human physiology in microgravity, advanced materials and alloys, fluid dynamics and propulsion systems, space medicine, and biotechnology. Geopolitical spin-offs. These experiments will have direct civilian and defense spin-offs, from improved medical treatments to advanced manufacturing and next-generation aerospace systems. Geopolitically, the station strengthens India's role within frameworks such as Quad and BRICS, while enabling collaboration with friendly nations lacking independent orbital platforms. ISRO has indicated openness to hosting international astronauts, turning the station into a tool of space diplomacy. Funding the future. Funding for the program is supported by India's expanding space budget, which crossed Rs 13,000 crore in 2025, with launch support from the proven GSLV Mark III and future next-generation launch vehicles. Reusability concepts under development could further reduce long-term costs. ISRO also plans a series of uncrewed precursor missions to validate docking systems, environmental controls, and long-duration sustainability, learning from global best practices without direct technology transfers.
What sets the Bharatiya Antariksh Station apart is not just science, it's strategy. In an era where space assets underpin missile defense, surveillance, navigation, and secure communication, a continuous human presence in orbit becomes a strategic advantage. As China expands its orbital footprint and space increasingly reflects geopolitical rivalries on Earth, India's decision to build its own space station signals one thing very clearly, that New Delhi intends to be a rule maker, not a rule taker in space. This is about autonomy, resilience, and long-term national power.
From launching satellites to sustaining life in orbit, India's space story is evolving at orbital speed. The Bharatiya Antariksh Station is not just a scientific platform, it's a declaration of intent that India is ready to move from margins of space exploration to the center of gravity, and by 2035, when Indian astronauts look down at Earth from their station, it won't just mark a technological achievement, it will mark India's arrival as a permanent space power. For nearly 8 decades, aircraft carriers have been the ultimate symbol of naval power, floating air bases that project dominance hundreds of kilometers from home shores. But that era is now under serious challenge. India has unveiled a weapon designed not to chase ships but to erase the advantage of aircraft carriers in altogether. The long-range anti-ship missile, a hypersonic glide weapon that has been developed specifically to counter high-value naval assets, including Chinese carrier strike groups operating in the Indian Ocean region. This is not just another missile test, it's a doctrinal shift.
Now,
Hypersonic anti-ship strike capability. India has quietly crossed a critical threshold in modern naval warfare. Developed by Defense Research and Development Organization, the long-range anti-ship missile LR-AShM represents India's entry into the small and exclusive club of nations with operational hypersonic anti-ship strike capability. The missile is built around hypersonic glide vehicle technology capable of reaching peak speeds approaching Mach 10 while sustaining an average hypersonic velocity of Mach 5 or higher across most of its flight. At these speeds, the physics of interception breaks down. With an operational reach of 1500 kilometers, the long-range ASHM enables India to strike aircraft carrier strike groups, forward naval bases, island outposts and logistics hubs. And that too from well beyond the detection and engagement envelope of most naval air defense systems. Covering this distance in roughly 15 minutes, the missile compresses enemies' decision-making time to near zero, overwhelming traditional layered air defenses built around early warning, interception, and redundancy. Flight behavior sets the LR-AShM apart. What truly sets the LR-AShM apart is its flight behavior. Unlike a ballistic missile that follows predictable arcs, the LR-AShM executes a low-altitude quasi-ballistic glide path remaining under radar horizons for much of its trajectory. In the terminal phase, the missile performs a high-G evasive maneuver guided by indigenous electro-optical, infrared and satellite-linked sensors, allowing it to lock onto and strike moving maritime targets, including maneuvering aircraft carriers. This capability directly targets the core vulnerability of carrier doctrine. The aircraft carriers rely on distance from adversary shores, long detection timelines, multi-layered air and missile defense. However, hypersonic glide weapons neutralize all these three. Strategically, the message is unambiguous. China's People's Liberation Army Navy has rapidly expanded its carrier fleet, with advanced platforms such as Fujian, designed to project power far beyond South China Sea and into the Indian Ocean. System designed for multi-platform deployment. The LR-AShM fundamentally alters that equation. By deploying these missiles through land-based coastal batteries, India can establish powerful anti-access, anti-denial zones, particularly around Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep, dominating choke points like the Malacca Strait, through which majority of China's energy and trade flows. The missile is optimized for conventional warheads during initial induction, delivering devastating kinetic and explosive impact. With a payload capacity of approximately 350 kilograms, more than sufficient to cripple or mission kill a super carrier. The system is designed for multi-platform deployment, land, sea and potentially air, providing India with flexible strike options across domains. Operational planning points to a large-scale induction by the early 2030s, potentially numbering in hundreds across Indian Navy, Army and the Air Force. This builds directly on India's hypersonic development lineage, including the BrahMos cruise missile program and hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle moving from experimentation to battlefield-ready deployment.
What the long-range anti-ship missile really does is force a fundamental rethink of naval dominance. Aircraft carriers are no longer just expensive assets, they are increasingly vulnerable. For Chinese naval planners, operating carriers in the Indian Ocean now comes with a new reality. They can be detected, tracked, and struck at hypersonic speeds with little warnings and limited defensive options. This missile doesn't just threaten ships, it threatens the very idea that carriers can operate freely near India's maritime backyard. This is deterrence by denial, and its fundamental changes the balance.
Speed has always defined power at sea. Today, speed defines survivability. With the long-range anti-ship missile, India has demonstrated that it can hold even most powerful naval assets at risk. That too quickly, precisely, and decisively. In the evolving chessboard of Indo-Pacific, aircraft carriers may still rule the seas, but not now. They sail under the hypersonic shadow. For decades, India's indigenous defense programs were treated as punchlines. Why struggle with Kaveri engine? Critics asked, when GE engines were available. Why build Prachand when Apaches could be bought off the shelf? Why push Tejas AMCA, Indian guns or drones when imported systems were already battle tested? Make in India in defense was dismissed as screwdriver assembly, emotional, inefficient, and unnecessary. This thinking dominated India's strategic conversation for years. The assumption was simple: foreign weapons equal reliability, speed, and superiority. But modern weapons are no longer just machines. They are ecosystem, software, source codes, sensors, engines, updates, and permission. You may own a jet, but you may not control it. And that distinction is everything. Global geopolitics shattered this illusion. Allies began discovering uncomfortable truths that weapon can't be used without political consent from the suppliers. Delayed spares, denied upgrades, blocked integration, export laws quietly in vogue. No kill switch required, supply chains themselves become the weapons. India doesn't need theory. It has experience. The Tejas Mark 1 Alpha slowdown wasn't caused by Indian design failure, but by foreign engine delays. A single choke point grounded an entire production line. This is the risk of outsourcing core technologies, engines, avionics, propulsion. You don't own sovereignty if someone else owns the heart of your weapon. Assembling foreign platforms in India offer comfort, not control. If the engine, software, or sensor remains foreign, veto power also remains with them. Even neutral countries have seen exports blocked or operations constrained due to this hidden dependency. Manufacturing without mastery is dependency in disguise. This is why Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense is not ideology, it's realism. Indigenous programs are slow, painful, and expensive. So were the F-35, Su-57, and every other serious weapon system in history. Capability matures only through iteration, failure, and persistence. There is no shortcut to sovereignty. India is no longer starting from zero. Tejas Mark 1 Alpha is nearing full operational strength. Mark 2 and AMCA are moving forward. Indigenous missiles, drones, and warships are proving themselves to be export-worthy. And these systems may not be perfect, for sure, but they are controllable. And in war, control beats perfection. This is not an argument against imports. Imports plug gaps, they buy time, but strategy cannot be built on indulgence. A force structure dominated by foreign platforms invites leverage, especially in crisis. In modern warfare, the equation is simple. Ownership without control is illusion. Dependence is vulnerability. A weapon you cannot freely use, modify, or sustain is not deterrence, it's a liability. Mocking indigenous defense misses the bigger picture. These programs are not perfect for sure. They are insurance, definitely. Insurance against coercion, against blackmail, against wars that are decided in distant capitals. In the end, sovereignty is not bought, it is built, and for India, there is no alternative. That's all for this week on Defense Dynamics. Share your comments on social media with #DDVDanveer. See you next week on new defense and geopolitical developments and their analysis. Until then, goodbye and take care.